Billionaire George Soros said he is working to bend the arc of history in the right direction. In Soros' case, that direction is far to the left. To do it, he donated over $32 billion to his open society foundations since 1984 to further leftist ideology and activism well beyond his own lifetime. Soros has committed a combined sum of more than $2.3 billion to create a global university network to push his extreme ideology. At 91, Soros hasn't slowed down his radical agenda to inundate the American people and the world with propaganda involving leftist academia and racial strife. He recently launched a $1 billion initiative to create a global university network to indoctrinate the next generation with his extremist open society worldview. The two educational institutions spearheading that effort, Central European University and Bard College, received another $1.3 billion from Soros. He also devoted hundreds of millions in donations and commitments to so-called social justice and racial justice groups, including those that promote the radical idea of reparations. Soros pursued those aims with everything from exploiting the death of George Floyd in 2020 to advance a leftist racial justice agenda, pledging $100 million to support radical feminism across the globe, pouring millions into left-wing journalism and financing groups promoting global climate change radicalism and anti-police hatred. His tremendous wealth gives him the ability to try to influence every aspect of American life, from political campaigns to drug policy. Instead of letting the foundation shut down upon his death, he guaranteed conservatives will be fighting his agenda for decades to come. Introduction. Liberal billionaire George Soros turned 91 on August 12, 2021, having devoted his philanthropic life to constructing a leftist political legacy rarely, if ever, equaled. He has worked to reshape the US and the world with his nebulous vision of an open society through billions in funding to universities, media, politicians, and left-wing groups. In Soros' view, the hallmarks of an open society include global governance, open borders, fomenting unrest, undermining national currencies, and donating millions to groups dedicated to crushing American exceptionalism and capitalism. Those who oppose his agenda have been his consistent targets, including Republican presidents George W. Bush and Donald Trump. As the Washington Post reported in 2018, rather than recede from public life in his twilight years, Soros has decided to push even harder for his agenda. The election of Donald Trump spurred Soros and his organizations to push aggressively in two key directions: education and race. Soros ensured that his charities will be incredibly well funded after he is gone. The New York Times reported in 2017 that Soros gave $18 billion to his leftist Open Society Foundations, OSF. It was one of the largest transfers of wealth ever made by a private donor to a single foundation. Emphasis added. The reason: Trump and his supporters. The Times summarized comments from now former OSF President Patrick Gaspard, who said the election of President Trump had given the organization's work a new sense of urgency. Soros ensured the promotion of his open society ideals well after his death. He set in motion plans to create a global education network dedicated to influencing future generations for decades to come. Soros devoted a mountain of money to education in recent years, $2.3 billion at least. He launched a $1 billion effort on January 23, 2020, to create a global university network with at least 41 institutions so far to promote his worldview. He has said he considers it to be the most important and enduring project of my life. Soros plans to have his network renamed the Soros University Network after his death. He also committed at least $1.3 billion between 2016 and 2020, split between two other institutions. Central European University and Bard College are deeply connected to his foundations and are pioneering the Open Society University Network, OSUN project. The education juggernaut is unlike anything the world has ever seen. Research revealed how left-wing the colleges are. CEU once promoted the extremist views of a Yale Law School professor, who said the alternatives to what he called Trump's fascism were socialism and barbarism. One of CEU's recent presidents demanded progressives be tougher on Trump's ethnic nationalism. Bard College held an event in November 2020 headlined, Reading the Signs in an ERA of Systemic Racism, which accused America of harboring systemic racism. Specifically, the event was engineered to shine some light on systemic racism and anti-racist alternatives in our everyday surroundings. Bard even offered a course in 2021 headlined, Abolishing Prisons and the Police. A global academic network fashioned in Soros' image. OSIN is already establishing its radical reputation. It held an event in 2021 connecting 9/11 to the rise of white supremacist extremism. It specifically entertained the question of the overlap between white supremacist movements and the genocide of black people by police. OSIN even promoted a course called Islamic Feminism, which promotes the idea that the introduction of Islam improved women's status substantially. On the economics front, OSIN also promoted an interview October 19, 2021, with far-left French economist Thomas Piketty. The interviewer, Bard Associate Professor of Economics Pavlina Cherneva, kicked it off by highlighting how she and other female scholars published a manifesto on the need to democratize work after the pandemic. She underscored 3 principles of the manifesto, which sounded like they were taken directly from Karl Marx. The first one is that it's time to democratize firms by involving employees in decisions relating to their lives and the future of the workplace. The second was the need to decommodify work by collectively guaranteeing useful, dignified employment opportunities to all. The third principle was perhaps the most extreme, and of course to decarbonize the planet, to marshal our collective resources and address climate change. Piketty also happens to be the same economist who told CBS Sunday Morning in September 2020 that crises like pandemics are sometimes necessary, unfortunately in a way, to deliver big political change or ideological change. OSIN seems interested in capitalizing on that idea by promoting the reorientation of the economy to serve its leftist interests. The network also held an event September 14, 2021, dedicated to white supremacist extremism in the US and beyond. The event attempted to blame the rise of white supremacist extremism on the Al-Qaeda terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001. The event announcement reads, "In particular, the rise of these movements must be linked to the global war on terror after September 11, which blinded counter-extremism authorities to the increasing threat they posed. One of the core focuses of the network is to battle the climate crisis. The network recently launched the Solve Climate by 2030 initiative, a coordinated effort to spread propaganda that the Earth only has 10 years to stave off disaster, which is about as realistic as when The Guardian pushed a false prophecy in 2004 that major European cities will be sunk beneath rising seas as Britain is plunged into a Siberian climate by 2020. In fact, climate activists have been pushing the 10-year window to save Earth line for decades. In 1989, the Associated Press published a story pushing a phony prediction that governments have a 10-year window of opportunity to solve the greenhouse effect before it goes beyond human control. The lead for that story was just as ridiculous. A senior UN environmental official says entire nations could be wiped off the face of the Earth by rising sea levels if the global warming trend is not reversed by the year 2000. OSIN seems to be utilizing old propaganda lines. Another OSUN project is dedicated toward pushing transnational feminism against Western culture. Its transnational feminism efforts include a deep exploration of inequalities that exist between women. This program actually includes an interpretation of Islamic feminism, which puts forth the outrageous notion that Islam improved women's status substantially. However, Soros radicalism has been shielded by the mainstream media. The liberal media have routinely attempted to falsely accuse journalists and conservatives of fomenting bigotry whenever questions about Soros' left-wing funding are raised. Broadcast networks have kept viewers in the dark about Soros' education agenda. Soros has made it clear that he intends his ultimate accomplishment to be the instilling of his values in future generations. In his book In Defense of Open Society, 2019, he detailed his plan for the Open Society University Network, a venture being led by 2 left-wing institutions, Central European University and Bard College. In effect, that means the right will be fighting Soros, or at least the financial juggernaut of his vision for decades to come. He committed $1 billion to the Global Education Network allegedly for the purpose of help, open societies to confront their enemies. The basic breakdown of Soros funding between OSUN, CEU, and BARD is as follows. Seed money for OSUN, $1 billion. 2016 to 2019 funding to CEU, $851 million. 2016 to 2019 funding to BARD, $4.9 million. Recent 2020 grant of $500 million to BARD. In total, Soros committed at least more than $2.3 billion, $2,355,899,231, collectively between the three entities. In addition to CEU and BARD, a number of colleges, universities, research and educational institutions have already partnered with OSUN in the U.S. and abroad. The list includes Arizona State University, University of California, Berkeley Human Rights Center, London School of Economics, and Columbia University's Picker Center for Executive Education. Soros' globalist vision for a global university is already taking hold. He claimed to have OSUN nodes already established in different areas throughout the world, which include the following: the US, New York and California; Central Asia, Bishkek; the Middle East, Al-Quds in East Jerusalem. That scheme positions Soros or his foundations to push global and globalist education for decades to come. Bard College Professor Emeritus of History Gennady Shklyarevsky rebuked his institution for joining with Soros' political agenda for education. In 2020, he called the Open Society University Network the making of an unholy alliance. The motivation for creating the OSUN is political. The OSUN will use education as a tool for ideological and political purposes to advance and promote the vision and ideology of open society. Combining education with ideological and political goals can amount to indoctrination, wrote Shklyarevsky in an op-ed. But like much of his decades-long efforts to influence U.S. and global politics with his wealth, the media are sweeping Soros' latest gambit under the rug. The network Evening News shows ignored Soros' latest billion-dollar effort to remake education for future generations. A Nexus search of ABC News, CBS News or NBC News Morning and Evening News shows for Soros from September 1, 2019, through March 17, 2021, turned up only 11 stories. None of them referenced the Open Society University Network, not even the September 9, 2020 Good Morning America segment that praised Soros for giving away so much of his wealth. The silence of all three networks left viewers ignorant about his ambitions.